The scandal broke on a Tuesday evening, just as London society was preparing for the season's most anticipated ball. Isabelle Graves stood in the shadows of the Blackwood estate's entrance hall, her heart pounding as raised voices echoed from the study above. She'd been explicitly told to wait downstairs, to remain silent and invisible until summoned. But the shouting made that impossible. Lady Catherine Blackwood had found Isabelle 3 days ago in the village, starving and desperate, sleeping in coaching in stables with nothing but stolen coins and the clothes on her back. The older woman had seen past the carefully maintained composure to the terror underneath, and she'd offered something impossible. Safety. Training. A position as governess that might give Isabelle a future beyond running. But now, listening to the Duke of Wikliffe argue with his mother about harboring strangers, Isabelle realized that safety had strings attached. Strings that were currently being pulled taut. Another one, mother. The man's voice was cold, each word clipped with aristocratic precision. How many strangers do you intend to house under this roof? She needs help, Nathaniel. Lady Catherine's tone remained steady, but Isabelle detected steel beneath the silk. And we need a governess. Mrs. Fletcher left 3 weeks ago. We need a governess with references, with training. Not some woman who appeared on our doorstep with nothing but a story I'm meant to accept without question. Isabelle's hands tightened on the banister. She'd fled her stepfather's house after he tried to sell her to a 60-year-old merchant to settle his gambling debts. She'd stolen £300 from his desk, money he'd wasted on cards and drink while telling her daily that she was worthless. The theft made her a criminal in the eyes of the law, but staying would have made her something worse. The door to the study stood partially open. Through the gap, Isabelle could see Lady Catherine's profile, back straight, hands folded calmly. The Duke stood with his back to the doorway, shoulders rigid beneath a perfectly tailored coat. She's educated, Lady Catherine said. Well spoken. The household staff needs direction, and she can learn. That's not the point. The Duke turned sharply, and Isabelle caught her first clear glimpse of him. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 33, with dark hair and a face that might have been handsome if it weren't set in such harsh lines. The point is that you make these decisions without consulting me. You bring strangers into my home. Our home, Lady Catherine corrected gently. My responsibility. His voice dropped, but the intensity didn't fade. Everything that happens under this roof, every person who walks through that door, it falls to me. Not you. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand what people will assume? What they'll say? I understand that you've become suspicious of everyone since your father died. The words fell like stones into still water. The Duke went very still, and Isabelle knew she should retreat, should go back downstairs and wait like she'd been told. But something in the raw grief beneath his anger kept her frozen in place. That's unfair, he said quietly. It's true. Lady Catherine moved closer to her son. Nathaniel, I know the title weighs heavily. I know you feel surrounded by people wanting something from you. But not everyone has ulterior motives. Sometimes people simply need help. And sometimes people see a title and an estate and decide that help is precisely what they should pretend to need. That was when Isabelle pushed the door fully open and stepped inside. Both heads turned sharply. Lady Catherine's expression showed only mild surprise, but the Duke's face darkened immediately. I told you to wait downstairs, Lady Catherine said, not unkindly. I'm sorry. Isabelle kept her voice level, meeting the Duke's cold gaze directly. But I won't have my character debated in my absence. If His Grace has concerns about my presence, he should address them to me. For a moment, no one spoke. The Duke stared at her as if she'd materialized from smoke. Then his jaw tightened. Get out. Nathaniel. No, Mother. He didn't raise his voice, but the command in it was absolute. If Miss Graves wishes to involve herself in this conversation, then she can begin by following basic instructions. The door. Now. Isabelle didn't move. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she'd spent too many years under her stepfather's roof learning to hide fear. I'm here because your mother believes people deserve second chances, even if you don't. The silence that followed felt like the moment before lightning struck. Did you just refuse a direct order? The Duke said slowly. I heard your order. I chose to finish speaking first. Isabelle forced herself not to look away. You're right that you don't know me. You're right to be cautious. But I'm not here to take advantage of anyone. I'm here because Lady Catherine offered me a chance to prove I'm worth more than the circumstances I left behind. If you're going to send me away, at least have the decency to tell me why while I'm in the room. Lady Catherine made a small sound, half laugh, half sigh. The Duke, however, looked like he was debating whether to call for a footman or throw her out himself. Then, very deliberately, he walked to the door and held it open. Downstairs. Now. If you're still in this house in 1 hour, we'll discuss the terms of your employment and the consequences of entering rooms uninvited. His gaze locked with hers. One misstep, Miss Graves. Just one. Do you understand? Isabelle understood perfectly. She also understood that she'd just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She nodded once and left the room, feeling his stare burning into her back with every step. The hour passed slowly. Isabelle waited in the entrance hall as instructed, watching servants move efficiently through their duties while she stood uselessly against the wall. A housemaid glanced at her curiously. The butler ignored her entirely. When Lady Catherine finally descended the stairs, her expression was carefully neutral. He's agreed. You'll serve as interim governess until we secure a permanent replacement. Mrs. Hill will show you to your room and explain your duties. You'll manage the household staff, coordinate with the cook and butler, and handle any domestic matters that don't require the Duke's direct attention. She paused, her eyes serious. He won't make this easy, Isabelle. You've challenged him on your first day, and Nathaniel doesn't forget challenges. I didn't mean to disrespect him. I know. Lady Catherine's smile was faint. But you did it anyway. That's going to complicate things. Isabelle followed the indicated path, relief and dread warring in her chest. She had a place to stay, work to do, a chance however precarious. She also had a Duke who looked at her like she was something dangerous that needed watching. By the time she reached her small room, clean and sparse but infinitely better than the stables, exhaustion had caught up with her. She sank onto the narrow bed and let herself breathe. She defied a Duke on her first day in his house. She had no idea what he would ask of her next, but she knew with cold certainty that nothing here would be simple. But what Isabelle didn't know, what she couldn't have known as she fell into exhausted sleep that first night, was that the Duke's younger brother was about to drag them all into a scandal that would change everything. Lord Edmund Blackwood had always been the charming one, the handsome second son who could talk his way out of any situation. While Nathaniel bore the weight of the dukedom with grim responsibility, Edmund floated through life on wit and good looks, gambling too much, drinking too freely, and leaving a trail of broken hearts across London. It was inevitable, really, that his carelessness would eventually catch up with him. The crisis arrived 1 week after Isabelle had settled into her new position. She was in the morning room, coordinating the week's menus with the cook, when Mr. Garrett appeared in the doorway with an expression she couldn't read. Miss Graves. His Grace requests your presence in his study. Immediately. Isabelle's stomach dropped. She'd been careful all week, following every instruction, staying out of the Duke's way, proving herself indispensable to the household staff. What could she have done wrong? She found Nathaniel pacing his study like a caged animal, fury radiating from every line of his body. Lady Catherine sat in a chair by the window, looking pale and worried. Close the door, Nathaniel said without preamble. Isabelle did, her heart racing. My brother has gotten himself into trouble. Nathaniel's voice was clipped, controlled in a way that suggested he was barely containing rage. Serious trouble. The kind that could destroy this family's reputation if it becomes public. He handed her a letter. Isabelle read it quickly, her eyes widening. Lord Edmund had been caught in a compromising situation with Lady Helena Worthington, the married daughter of one of London's most powerful lords. There were witnesses. Servants who'd seen them together in circumstances that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Lady Helena's husband was threatening to call Edmund out, to demand satisfaction in a duel that would create a scandal neither family could survive. "This is bad," Isabelle said quietly. "This is catastrophic." Nathaniel stopped pacing and looked at her directly. "Lord Worthington is politically connected, vindictive, and looking for any excuse to damage our family. My father once opposed him in Parliament on a matter of great importance to Worthington's business interests. The man has been waiting years for an opportunity like this." Lady Catherine spoke for the first time, her voice tired. "Edmund claims it was a misunderstanding, that Lady Helena initiated the encounter and that he tried to extricate himself without causing offense." "Do you believe him?" Isabelle asked. "I believe my son is often foolish but rarely malicious." Lady Catherine's hands twisted in her lap. "But belief doesn't matter when there are witnesses willing to testify to what they saw." Nathaniel resumed his pacing. "Worthington wants blood. He's demanding Edmund make a public apology, admitting to inappropriate behavior and accepting full responsibility. If Edmund refuses, Worthington will challenge him to a duel. Either way, the scandal becomes public, and we're ruined. Can't you negotiate? Pay him off?" Nathaniel's laugh was bitter. "I offered. Worthington isn't interested in money. He wants humiliation. He wants to see a Blackwood brought low." Isabelle's mind raced. There had to be a solution, some way to protect the family without destroying Edmund. "Where is Lord Edmund now?" "Being kept out of sight at our London residence." Nathaniel looked at her sharply. "Why?" "Because I might have an idea." Isabelle set the letter down carefully. "But you're not going to like it." The plan Isabelle proposed was audacious to the point of madness. It required careful timing, absolute discretion, and a willingness to manipulate society's expectations in ways that made even Lady Catherine uncomfortable. But it might work. The key, Isabelle explained, was understanding what Lord Worthington really wanted. He didn't want money or even a duel. He wanted power. He wanted the satisfaction of making the proud Blackwood family bend to his will. "So we give him that," Isabelle said. "Just not in the way he expects." Over the next 3 days, Isabelle became the architect of an elaborate performance. She coordinated with Edmund, who turned out to be as charming as advertised and far cleverer than his reputation suggested. She enlisted Lady Catherine's help in spreading carefully crafted rumors through society. And she pushed Nathaniel to do something that clearly went against every instinct he possessed. "Trust me," she said when he balked at her more outrageous suggestions. "I know how men like Worthington think. I grew up with one." "You're asking me to stake my family's reputation on your judgment," Nathaniel said. "We've known each other a week. Your brother's situation is already staking your reputation. I'm offering you a chance to control the narrative instead of letting Worthington write it for you." They stared at each other across his desk, tension crackling between them. Finally, Nathaniel nodded. "One chance, Miss Graves. If this fails, if you've miscalculated, you understand what it will cost?" "I understand." Isabelle met his gaze steadily. "And I'll accept the consequences if I'm wrong." The evening of the Worthington ball arrived with London society buzzing with anticipation. Everyone knew something was brewing between the Blackwoods and the Worthingtons, though the exact nature of the scandal remained tantalizingly unclear. Isabelle dressed in a gown Lady Catherine had lent her, simple but elegant, appropriate for a governess attending her employers to a society event. Her role tonight was to observe, to ensure every piece of the plan fell into place at exactly the right moment. Edmund arrived at the ball with Nathaniel, both men looking composed despite the tension that radiated from them. Lord Worthington watched them enter with predatory satisfaction, clearly expecting them to approach him with some desperate offer of appeasement. Instead, Edmund made his way directly to Lady Helena, who stood beside her husband looking pale and nervous. What happened next was a masterclass in social manipulation. Edmund bowed formally to Lord Worthington, his manner respectful but not subservient. "My lord, I've come to apologize for any distress my presence may have caused your household. The misunderstanding that occurred was deeply unfortunate, and I take full responsibility for not being more careful about propriety." The words were carefully chosen. Edmund wasn't admitting to an affair, just to being careless about appearances. Worthington's expression darkened. "Misunderstanding? You were found in a private room with my wife. I was found speaking with Lady Helena about a charitable matter in which she'd expressed interest." Edmund's voice remained calm. "When her maid entered and misinterpreted the situation, I should have immediately clarified. Instead, I left, hoping to avoid embarrassment. That was wrong of me." Worthington opened his mouth to respond, but Edmund wasn't finished. "However, I must address the accusations your servants have been spreading." He pulled a document from his jacket. "I have here signed statements from 3 witnesses, including Lady Helena's own maid, attesting that the conversation was brief, that the door remained open, and that nothing improper occurred." Isabelle watched Lady Helena's face. The woman looked shocked, then relieved, then grateful. She'd clearly been terrified of the scandal as much as Edmund was. Worthington snatched the document, reading rapidly. His face went from red to purple. "This is impossible. My servants would never." "Your servants were offered considerable sums by someone seeking to damage the Blackwood reputation," Edmund said smoothly. "We have evidence of the payments. The question is whether you were aware of this plot against both our families, or whether you were manipulated as surely as Lady Helena and I were." It was brilliant. Edmund had turned the entire situation around, making Worthington the potential victim of a conspiracy rather than the righteous husband defending his honor. And there was just enough truth in it to be plausible. Investigation had revealed that one of Worthington's own business rivals had indeed been offering bribes to servants, trying to create a scandal that would distract Worthington from an important parliamentary vote. Lady Helena chose that moment to speak, her voice quiet but clear. "The meeting was innocent, husband. I had asked Lord Edmund about his mother's charitable work with displaced women. When my maid entered and seemed shocked, I didn't correct her assumption because I was embarrassed. I should have spoken up immediately." She looked at Edmund with genuine gratitude. "Lord Edmund has been nothing but proper. Any scandal is the creation of those who sought to use me against you. I want to be safe. I want to be useful." Isabelle's throat tightened. "I want to matter to someone in a way that isn't about what I can provide or how I can be used." "You matter." The words were quiet but absolute. "To my mother, to this household. To me." The admission hung between them, weighted with meaning neither of them was quite ready to examine. "Thank you," Isabelle said finally, "for trusting me with your brother's situation." Nathaniel turned from the window, his expression shifting into something almost like a smile. "I didn't have much choice. You'd already figured out the problem and proposed a solution before I could object." "Would you have objected?" "Probably." His smile widened slightly. "I'm very good at objecting to things that might actually help me. I've noticed." They looked at each other across the library, and Isabelle felt something shift between them. Not quite friendship, not yet trust, but the beginning of possibility. "My mother wants you to stay permanently," Nathaniel said. "Not as interim governess. As part of the household staff with a proper salary and position." "And what do you want?" The question seemed to surprise him. He was quiet for a long moment, considering. I want to know why someone with your intelligence and skill is willing to work as a governess when you could clearly do so much more. Because governesses are respectable. Isabelle's voice was steady. Because a woman with no family and no references doesn't have many options, and this position gives me safety while I figure out what comes next. What does come next? I don't know. Isabelle stood, suddenly restless. I've spent so long just trying to survive that I haven't thought beyond the immediate future. You should think beyond it. Nathaniel moved closer, his presence filling the space between them. You're too clever to spend your life managing household accounts and mediating disputes between maids. What would you have me do instead? I don't know yet. But after watching you handle Lord Worthington tonight, I'm beginning to think my mother was right to bring you here. We need someone like you. Someone like me, Isabelle repeated carefully. What does that mean? Someone who sees solutions where I see only problems. Someone who understands people instead of fearing them. Nathaniel stopped directly in front of her. Someone who reminds me that not everyone is trying to take advantage of the Duke of Wikliffe. I could never take advantage of you. You're far too suspicious. He laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. Perhaps I am. But you're making me want to be less so. The words were almost a confession. Isabelle felt her breath catch, suddenly very aware of how close they were standing, how the lamplight caught the angles of his face, how his dark eyes watched her with an intensity that made her pulse race. This was dangerous. She was an employee in his household, a woman with no position or power, and he was a duke who could destroy her with a word. Getting involved, catching feelings, wanting something beyond safety and work, that was a risk she couldn't afford. But looking at him now, seeing past the cold mask to the lonely, wounded man underneath, Isabelle wondered if some risks might be worth taking. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken things. Then Nathaniel stepped back, breaking the spell. It's late. You should rest. Tomorrow we'll need to review the household accounts and coordinate with Edmund about managing any remaining fallout from tonight. The return to practicality was jarring but necessary. Isabelle nodded, gathering her notes. Of course, Your Grace. Nathaniel, he said quietly. When we're alone, you can call me Nathaniel. It was a small thing, an informality that meant nothing and everything. Isabelle looked at him, saw the offering for what it was, a gesture of trust, a lowering of walls. Good night, Nathaniel. Good night, Isabelle. She left the library feeling like something fundamental had just shifted between them, like they'd crossed into territory neither of them quite understood but both were willing to explore. The days that followed brought a new rhythm to the household. Edmund returned from London, grateful and chastened, full of effusive thanks that Isabelle deflected with practiced ease. The scandal faded as quickly as society scandals always did, replaced by newer, more interesting gossip. But the change in Nathaniel's behavior toward Isabelle was impossible to miss. He sought her out in the mornings, asking her opinion on estate matters. He invited her to join family dinners instead of eating with the staff. He listened when she spoke, really listened, as if her words mattered. The household staff noticed. Mrs. Hill watched with cautious approval. Mr. Garrett maintained his usual disapproving silence. Lady Catherine smiled knowingly but said nothing. 2 weeks after the Worthington affair, another crisis emerged. This time, it wasn't a scandal but a practical problem that threatened the estate's finances. Isabelle discovered it while reviewing quarterly accounts. The numbers didn't match. Significant funds were being diverted somewhere, hidden in carefully disguised line items that most people would never notice. Someone was stealing from the Blackwood estate. And they'd been doing it for months. She brought the evidence to Nathaniel immediately, spreading the ledgers across his desk and walking him through the discrepancies. Here. She pointed to a column of figures. These payments are listed as maintenance costs, but they're 3 times higher than previous quarters. And these supplier invoices don't match the actual deliveries recorded by the household staff. Nathaniel studied the numbers, his expression growing darker. How much? At least £5,000 over the past year. Possibly more. Whoever's doing this is clever. They've been careful to keep individual amounts small enough not to trigger immediate suspicion. £5,000. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. That's not a mistake. That's systematic theft. I know. Isabelle hesitated. And I think I know who's responsible. She explained her theory, built on weeks of observation and careful questions. Mr. Garrett, the butler who'd served Nathaniel's father and viewed all changes with suspicion, had access to the accounts. He coordinated with suppliers. He managed staff payments. And he'd been visibly uncomfortable when Isabelle had started implementing new accounting procedures. Nathaniel listened in silence, his face unreadable. Garrett has been with this family for 30 years, he said finally. He served my father with absolute loyalty. People change. Isabelle kept her voice gentle. Maybe he felt entitled after so many years of service. Maybe he had debts you didn't know about. The why doesn't matter as much as the fact that it's happening. You want me to accuse a man who's been like family based on accounting discrepancies? I want you to investigate before more money disappears. Isabelle met his eyes. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But you need to know the truth. Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment, clearly torn between loyalty and duty. How would you suggest we proceed? Carefully. Isabelle had already thought this through. We need proof beyond the ledgers. I suggest we set a trap, create a situation where he'll have to either expose himself or prove his innocence. What kind of trap? She explained her plan. It involved creating a fake emergency expense, a significant payment that would need to be processed quickly. If Garrett was innocent, he'd follow proper procedures. If he was guilty, he'd try to manipulate the situation to skim money. It was risky. If they were wrong, they'd be unfairly testing a loyal servant. If they were right, they'd be exposing a betrayal that would devastate Nathaniel. Do it, Nathaniel said finally. But Isabelle, if you're wrong about this, if we humiliate Garrett for nothing, it will destroy trust throughout the entire household. I know. And I'll accept responsibility if that happens. The trap was set 3 days later. Isabelle created a scenario involving urgent repairs to the estate's tenant cottages, work that supposedly couldn't wait. The payment had to be processed immediately, before proper approvals could be obtained. Mr. Garrett took the bait. Isabelle and Nathaniel watched from a concealed position as the butler met with a supplier in the estate's courtyard, negotiating a price that was significantly higher than the actual work required. The difference would be split between them, with Garrett pocketing his share before reporting the full amount to Nathaniel. It was exactly what Isabelle had predicted. And it made her sick to witness. Nathaniel's face was carved from stone as they confronted Garrett in his study. The butler stood rigid, defiant even in the face of undeniable evidence. I've served this family for 30 years, Garrett said, his voice shaking with anger more than fear. I've given everything to the Blackwoods. And you've been stealing from us for at least a year. Nathaniel's voice was cold. Why? Because your father promised me a pension. Garrett's composure cracked. He promised that after 30 years of service, I'd be taken care of. Then he died, and you never mentioned it. You never honored his promise. What promise? Nathaniel looked genuinely confused. My father kept meticulous records. If he'd promised you a pension, it would be documented. It was a private conversation. Between gentlemen. Garrett's lip curled. But you're not your father, are you? You don't trust anyone enough to honor private agreements. The accusation hung in the air, and Isabelle saw Nathaniel flinch. If you needed money, if you felt you were owed something, you should have come to me, Nathaniel said quietly. Stealing was never the answer. Would you have believed me? Or would you have assumed I was trying to take advantage of the new Duke, just like everyone else? The words cut deep because they were probably true. 3 years ago, Nathaniel might have dismissed any request from Garrett as opportunistic manipulation. "You're right," Nathaniel said, surprising both Isabelle and the butler. "I wouldn't have believed you. I've been so determined to protect myself from being used that I couldn't see when legitimate needs existed right under my own roof." He moved to his desk, pulling out a document. "My father did promise you a pension. I found the notation in his personal journals last year, but I didn't know how to verify it, so I did nothing. That was wrong of me." Garrett stared, shock replacing anger. "I'm going to honor that pension," Nathaniel continued. "But you're still going to repay every pound you stole. We'll arrange a payment plan that doesn't leave you destitute, but you will make restitution. And then you're going to leave this household. I can't keep a butler I can't trust, even if I understand why you felt compelled to steal. It was fair. More than fair, actually." Garrett seemed to realize that as well. "I'm sorry," the butler said finally, voice rough. "I convinced myself I was only taking what was owed. But you're right. I should have asked first." After Garrett left the study, Nathaniel sat heavily in his chair, looking exhausted. "Another betrayal," he said bitterly. "Another person who wanted something from me. He wanted what he was promised." Isabelle sat across from him. "That's not the same as manipulation. Isn't it?" "No." She leaned forward. "Nathaniel, your father made him a promise. You didn't know about it, so you didn't honor it. Garrett handled it badly by stealing instead of speaking up, but the original failure was a broken promise, not greed." "You're defending him?" "I'm trying to help you see this clearly." Isabelle's voice was gentle. "Not everyone who asks you for something is trying to take advantage. Sometimes people just need what they were told they'd receive." Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment. "You're right. I've been so focused on protecting myself that I've hurt people without realizing it." He stood, moving to the window. "My father was better at this. At seeing people's needs, at balancing generosity with responsibility. I've just been suspicious and harsh. You've been hurt. That changes how you see the world. It shouldn't change it this much." Nathaniel's voice was full of self-recrimination. "I should be better than this." Isabelle went to stand beside him. "You're learning. That's what matters. You honored the pension even after Garrett stole from you. You found a way to be both just and compassionate. Your father would be proud of that." Nathaniel turned to look at her, something vulnerable in his expression. "How do you always know what to say?" "I don't. I'm just trying to be honest. Your honesty is one of the things I value most about you." The admission was simple, but it carried weight. Isabelle felt warmth spread through her chest, dangerous and wonderful. They stood at the window together, watching the sun set over the estate grounds, and Isabelle realized that somewhere in the past month, her feelings had shifted from cautious gratitude to something far more complicated. She was falling for him. For the wounded, suspicious Duke who was slowly learning to trust again. For the man who listened to her advice and valued her intelligence. For Nathaniel, not his grace. It was the worst possible thing that could happen. The realization hit her 3 days later when she received a letter that changed everything. It arrived addressed to her personally, delivered by a private courier who refused to say who'd sent it. Isabelle opened it in her room, hand shaking as she recognized her stepfather's handwriting. "Isabelle, you think you can hide forever? You think some aristocratic woman's pity will protect you from what you are, from what you owe? I know where you are. I know whose house you're hiding in. You have 1 week to return, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of woman the Duke of Wikliffe has employed. The theft you committed, the reputation you destroyed, the family you abandoned. Come home before I come for you. Robert Thorne." The letter fell from her nerveless fingers. He'd found her. Somehow, her stepfather had tracked her to the Blackwood estate, and he was threatening everything she'd built here. She had to leave. Had to disappear before Robert made good on his threats, before he brought scandal to the family that had shown her kindness. But the thought of leaving, of never seeing Nathaniel again, made her chest ache in ways she couldn't ignore. She was still sitting frozen on her bed when someone knocked. "Miss Graves?" Lady Catherine's voice, gentle but concerned. "May I come in?" Isabelle couldn't find the words to answer, but Lady Catherine entered anyway, taking one look at her face and closing the door quickly. What happened? Wordlessly, Isabelle handed her the letter. Lady Catherine read it, her expression hardening with each line. "Robert Thorne. Your stepfather?" "Yes." "What does he actually want? Me gone? Or money? Or both?" Isabelle's voice was hollow. "I stole from him when I left. £300. He wants restitution or revenge. With him, they're usually the same thing." Lady Catherine folded the letter precisely. "You're not leaving." "I have to. He'll ruin you, ruin Nathaniel. He'll spread lies about why I'm here, about my character. Then we'll show him those lies won't work." Lady Catherine's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Men like Robert Thorne trade in intimidation. They rely on fear. The moment you run, you confirm his power over you. But your family's reputation will survive a groundless accusation from a cruel stepfather trying to reclaim his escaped victim." Lady Catherine met her eyes. "You're not the first woman I've helped, Isabelle. I know how this works. We stand firm, and he has nothing. He knows people. He can make things very difficult. So can I. And more importantly, so can Nathaniel if he chooses to." "He won't." Isabelle's voice cracked. "He already thinks I'm a potential threat. This will just confirm it. Then we'll change his mind." Lady Catherine took her hand, squeezing firmly. "Trust me. We're not giving up on you yet." But when Nathaniel learned about the letter, and he would because Lady Catherine told him everything, the conversation didn't go as Isabelle had hoped. She wasn't present when it happened. She was in the office trying to work, trying not to imagine packing her few belongings and disappearing into the night. But she heard the argument. Everyone heard it. "You can't be serious." The Duke's voice carried through the manor's walls with perfect clarity. "You're inviting scandal into this house deliberately. I'm protecting someone who needs protection." Lady Catherine's response was quieter but no less firm. She brought this on herself. She escaped a dangerous man. That's not bringing trouble, that's surviving. And now he's threatening us, our reputation, our position. Do you understand what that means? I understand that you're letting fear make decisions for you." Silence. Terrible, heavy silence. "Then, I want her gone by morning." Isabelle closed her eyes, feeling the words like blows. She'd known. Of course she'd known. But hearing it still hurt. She didn't pack. Didn't run. She simply sat in the office, staring at the correspondence she'd been organizing, and waited for the inevitable summons. It came an hour later. Mr. Garrett's replacement, the temporary butler, informing her that the Duke requested her presence in his study. She went. What else could she do? Nathaniel stood at the window, back rigid. He didn't turn when she entered. "Close the door." She did. "Tell me the truth." His voice was flat, controlled. "All of it. What did you take from him? What does he actually want?" "Money," Isabelle said quietly. £300 I stole from his desk. He used it to gamble, to drink. I used it to survive." "So you're a thief." The word hung in the air like smoke. Isabelle lifted her chin. Yes. I'm a thief who stole from a man who beat me, who tried to arrange a marriage to a 60-year-old merchant in exchange for settling his debts, who told me I was worthless every day of my life after my mother died. If that makes me irredeemable in your eyes, then send me away. But don't pretend the theft is the real issue. He finally turned. His face was unreadable. The real issue is that you brought danger to my house, to my mother, and you said nothing. Because I didn't think he could find me. I didn't think. Her voice broke. She forced it steady. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't protect us from scandal. I know. She met his eyes. That's why I'm leaving tonight. He won't follow if I'm gone. Yes, he will. Nathaniel moved closer, frustration finally bleeding through his composure. Men like him don't stop. They escalate. You running just means he'll chase harder, threaten louder. Do you understand that? Then what do you want from me? Isabelle's hands clenched at her sides. You want me gone? Fine, I'm going. You'll be safe. I want to know if I can trust you. The words came out harsh, raw. I want to know if you're using my mother's kindness as a shield while you extract everything you can. I want to know if letting you stay means risking everything my father built, everything I'm responsible for protecting. The honesty of it, the fear beneath the anger, made Isabelle's chest tighten. I don't want anything from you. I just want to survive. That's all I've ever wanted. Your mother offered me a chance to do that with dignity instead of desperation. If that's not enough, if my presence here is too costly, then tell me and I'll go. But don't accuse me of manipulation when all I've done is try to be useful. They stared at each other across the study's expensive carpet. Isabelle could see him calculating, weighing risks, trying to decide if she was worth the trouble. Finally, he looked away. You'll stay. For now. He held up a hand when she started to speak. One more problem. One more threat. One more hidden truth that explodes in my face, and you're gone. Understood? Understood. Good. He moved back to the window, dismissing her without another word. Close the door on your way out. Isabelle left, relief and dread tangling in her stomach. She'd bought herself time, but the cost felt like a blade balanced above her head, waiting to fall. What she didn't know was that Nathaniel had already made a decision. One he wouldn't share with anyone, not even his mother. He was going to protect Isabelle. Not because duty demanded it, but because somewhere in the chaos of the past month, she'd become more than just an employee he tolerated. She'd become someone he couldn't imagine losing. The investigation he launched was discreet, thorough, and devastatingly effective. Private investigators combed through Robert Thorne's history, documenting years of cruelty, gambling debts, and manipulation. They found the merchant Thorne had tried to sell Isabelle to, a man with a reputation for brutality toward his household staff. They gathered witness testimony about Thorne's treatment of his stepdaughter after her mother died. Within 2 weeks, Nathaniel had compiled enough evidence to destroy Robert Thorne's credibility completely. But he didn't share this with Isabelle. He worked in silence, watching her move through the household with careful competence, seeing the fear she tried to hide, the way she braced herself for dismissal every time he entered a room. It broke something in him, knowing she expected rejection. Knowing she thought he'd abandon her the moment protecting her became inconvenient. The confrontation with Robert Thorne happened on a Tuesday morning when the bastard showed up at the Blackwood estate demanding to see his stepdaughter. Isabelle was in the garden when Mr. Garrett's replacement found her, looking agitated. "Miss Graves, there's a man at the front gate claiming to be your guardian. His Grace is speaking with him now." Terror washed through her. Robert was here. At the estate. About to destroy everything. She ran to the entrance hall, arriving just as Nathaniel was ushering a well-dressed man into the foyer. Robert Thorne looked exactly as she remembered, handsome in a cruel way, his smile charming until you saw the calculation behind it. "Isabelle." Robert's voice was smooth, concerned, the voice of a worried guardian. "Thank God. I've been so worried about you." Isabelle stood frozen, unable to speak. "Mr. Thorne." Nathaniel's voice was ice. "You've made some serious accusations about Miss Graves. I think we should discuss them properly." He led them to his study, and Isabelle followed numbly, feeling like she was walking to her own execution. But what happened in that study wasn't what she expected. Nathaniel didn't ask her to defend herself. Didn't demand explanations or force her to relive the trauma of her stepfather's abuse. Instead, he simply laid out the evidence his investigators had gathered. Documentation of Robert's gambling debts. Witness testimony about his treatment of Isabelle. Records of the attempted marriage arrangement with the elderly merchant. Everything, presented with clinical precision, destroying every lie Robert had tried to tell. Robert's face went from confident to furious to panicked as Nathaniel spoke. "This is slander," Robert said finally, his voice shaking. "Lies manufactured to protect a thief. These are facts, verified by multiple independent sources." Nathaniel's voice was deadly calm. "You've been living beyond your means for years, using your stepdaughter's small inheritance to fund your gambling. When she escaped, you lost access to that money, and now you're desperate." He leaned forward. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave this estate immediately. You're going to return to whatever hole you crawled out of. And you're never going to contact Miss Graves again. You can't threaten me. I have rights as her guardian. You have no rights." Nathaniel pulled out another document. "I've had my solicitors research the matter thoroughly. Isabelle is 22 years old, well past the age of majority. Your guardianship ended years ago. You have no legal claim to her whatsoever." Robert's composure shattered completely. "She stole from me £300. Money that was never yours to begin with." Nathaniel's smile was cruel. "The inheritance from her mother that you've been embezzling for years. I have records of that too. If you want to press charges for theft, I'll be happy to counter with documentation of your financial abuse spanning 6 years." The threat was clear. Robert could try to hurt Isabelle, but he'd be destroyed in the process. "Leave now," Nathaniel said quietly. "Or I'll have you thrown out and make sure every magistrate in England knows exactly what you are." Robert looked at Isabelle, saw no sympathy, no fear, just cold determination. He looked at Nathaniel and saw implacable resolve. He left. Isabelle didn't realize she was shaking until the door closed behind her stepfather. Then her legs gave out, and she would have fallen if Nathaniel hadn't caught her. He held her as she cried, great heaving sobs of relief and grief and release. All the fear she'd been carrying for months poured out, and he just held her, solid and warm and safe. When she finally calmed, he pulled back just enough to look at her face. "He's gone. He can't hurt you anymore. You protected me." Isabelle's voice was raw. "After everything, after doubting me, you still protected me." "Of course I protected you." Nathaniel's hands were gentle on her shoulders. "Did you really think I'd let that man hurt you? I thought you'd send me away. I thought I was too much trouble." "You are trouble." He smiled, the expression soft and genuine. "You're terrifying and complicated, and you make me question everything I thought I knew about trust and vulnerability." He cupped her face in his hands. "You're also brave and brilliant and the best thing that's happened to this family in years. So yes, you're trouble. But you're our trouble now. And I protect what's mine." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither of them could quite deny anymore. Isabelle looked at him, at the Duke who'd been so suspicious and cruel when they first met, who'd slowly revealed himself to be wounded and lonely and desperate for connection. And she realized she was in love with him. Completely, irrevocably, disastrously in love with Nathaniel Blackwood. The thought should have terrified her. should have sent her running for safer ground. Instead, it felt like coming home. "Nathaniel," she whispered. He kissed her before she could finish the thought, soft and careful and full of unspoken promises. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "This is complicated," Nathaniel said against her mouth. "Very complicated," Isabelle agreed. "You work for my family." "I know. Society will assume the worst." "Probably. My mother will be insufferably pleased with herself for bringing you here." "Definitely." He laughed, the sound free and joyful in a way she'd never heard before. "I don't care about any of it. About what people think or what society expects." He pulled her close again. "I just care about you. And I'm done pretending I don't. So what do we do now?" "Now we figure this out together." Nathaniel's eyes were full of determination. "No more hiding. No more pretending. We tell my mother, we handle whatever scandal comes, and we build something real. What if it doesn't work? What if the scandal is too much? Then we'll face it together." He pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm done making decisions based on fear, Isabelle. You taught me that being brave means trusting people even when it's terrifying. So I'm choosing to trust this. To trust us." Isabelle kissed him again, putting all her hope and fear and love into the contact. They stood in his study, holding each other, and both of them knew nothing would be simple from here. There would be gossip. Questions. Judgment from people who thought a duke shouldn't marry so far beneath his station. But they also knew they'd face it together. And that made all the difference.